recording now so I don't forget. Okay. Oh, yesterday I was able to connect all of this. Hello, everyone. I know we're still getting a few people joining us here, but I want to make sure that we go ahead and get started on time. My name is Julianne Foster. I am one of the field faculty advisors here at the Mandel School. And it is my honor today to present Naomi Sig. She is the Vice President for Student Experience and Campus Belonging at John Carroll University. In her role, she oversees the Dean of Students Office, Wellness Initiatives, Counseling Center, Rest Life, Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion, Student Engagement, Campus Recreation, Student Accessibility Services, Title IX Initiatives, and the Office of DEIB. Naomi has 20 years of progressive experience in higher education with a specialization in leadership, diversity and inclusion, and student development. Prior to her time at John Carroll, she served as a Senior Associate Dean of Students and Director of Multicultural Affairs at Case Western Reserve University. Naomi has been invited to share her expertise in the DEIB field through presentations at various conferences, including the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, the International Conference on Conflict Resolution and Education, and the American College Personnel Association. She lives in Northeast Ohio with her partner and 3 children. So thank you so much, Naomi, for joining us today, and I will pass it off to you.
Thank you so much, Julianne. And thank you to the Mandel School for inviting me to be part of this really great opportunity to share some, just sort of some little tidbits that might be helpful when it comes to inclusive language. I think that we communicate with each other every day, and it's important to be thoughtful about how we're communicating with each other, with our clients, with the colleagues that we work with community members, and even with our friends and our family. So I hope that some of what we learned today together will be very helpful in all aspects of your life and in your career. So we'll get started real quick. I like to just talk a little bit about me, because sometimes you want to know, okay, who is this person that's talking to me and sharing this information? Julianne was able to share a little bit about my career, but I've kind of bounced around all different places. I'm originally from the Philippines. I actually came here when I was young, so I was born in the Philippines, and that's a big part of my life. So when I say things like I go by pronouns she, her, and siya, that third pronoun is the way in which a lot of Filipinos identify as well. So the Philippines is important to me, and it's a big part of my culture and identity. I put down here just a few places I've worked and, where I've lived. Before coming to Case Western Reserve, which I spent about 9 years at, almost 9 years, I was at Washington University in St. Louis. So I loved living in St. Louis. My older children were born in St. Louis, and it still has a place in my heart. Before going to St. Louis, I actually did my undergrad and grad work at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and I appreciate the the honor that they pay to the Miamia tribe in this logo here. So I wanted to share that. And I love cooking. I love food. I'm a foodie. My kids are foodies. My kids try everything, which I'm so grateful for. So food is a big part of our life, and right now I'm at John Carroll, and I've been really enjoying learning about and becoming, a leader in the Jesuit and Catholic institutions, field. And so it's been really great to learn. And this is my family, as you can see top left. Some of you who might be familiar with Mandel School might know my partner, Richard Sig, so and might work with him. So that's just a little bit about me, and I think it's important to share a little bit about who is talking with you. And so that's my story. So in this presentation, I don't like to just lecture at folks. I think it's important that we learn from each other, and that there are opportunities for engagement, even in the space through chat. We'll have a couple of breakout rooms that will be helpful for you to engage with each other. And so I do want to make sure we have some ground rules to think about. The first thing is just listen respectfully. I think it's important that everyone has a voice and is able to have space to share their thoughts and their ideas in a way in which they're respected. I know that it's lunchtime on a Friday, and so your mind may be all different places, what's going on in the weekend. You might have projects at work, but as much as we can, try to be present in this moment. Speak only from your truth. We are experts in our own stories and our own lived experiences. So use those I statements and speak on behalf of yourself and not of a group or a community. You never know what happens in sessions like these as you're sharing things. So it's important that we honor confidentiality. I like to use the phrase, take the learning outside of the room or the Zoom room as it is right now, but leave the names in the room. So, making sure that we are honoring confidentiality. If folks share things that they've never shared before or only share with people they trust, let's honor that. Share airtime. It is important that everyone, hopefully as you're in the small groups, everyone's voice can be heard in those spaces, and encourage other people to share too. I like this one, take each other's words as gifts. I think in the very polarized and divided society right now, we don't do that enough. And even when people say things that we don't love, I often think of it in a different way. And I try to be curious, not furious. I try to think about what they said and how it might help me to be more firm in what I value and believe, or help me change my mind and think a little bit differently than I have. So I take those words as gifts. Be open. You might hear different perspectives, different thoughts, and I'm not an expert in all things language, so I may learn something from you, and that is wonderful, and I'm open to that. And finally, just enjoy the learning. We're all here to learn. We're all here to grow. I think you're here because you have a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, social justice, you caring for the whole person. And so that is something to enjoy, which is to learn and to grow in these areas. So these are the ground rules. Are there any others that you all are interested in adding to this? Happy to look at the chat if anyone else would like to add anything else to this list. And if you don't think of anything now, that's okay. Feel free to add it to the chat. We're gonna keep watch when it comes to the chat box so that we can make sure we can read out loud what folks are saying. All right. So where are we headed? I always like to know what's going to happen. What are we going to talk about in a session? So here's where we're headed. We're going to do a quick activity around names. We're going to talk about allyship. When it comes to doing this work, a lot of us want to consider ourselves allies to different communities, and particularly communities that we don't belong to that might be marginalized in society. What does that mean? And how do we think about ourselves as allies in this work when it comes to inclusive language? We'll talk about person first language. We'll talk about identity first language. We'll talk about violent language, gender inclusive language, and language focused on race. And then we're going to practice. These are all not extensive or exhaustive lists of all ways in which we can be inclusive in our language, but I will be providing some resources that you can kind of take a look at later on if you'd like to learn a little bit more after this session. But here are some things that I wanted to focus on today. And like I say to folks who do any webinars, with me or trainings, I hope that after this, you are curious and you want to know more and you want to learn more. All right. So I love this quote because I think it's so important for us to think about, and I'll read out loud. Daring leaders say the unsaid, unsurface what's been pushed down, and bring to light the stuff that's in the shadows and in the corners. Sometimes we have to be daring leaders, and sometimes we have to say things that people don't want to talk about. And I think this topic is sometimes something that people don't want to talk about. We don't want to talk about the ways in which we communicate with each other and how they can be manners in which that can be really exclusive or make folks feel not valued or disrespected, or in ways in which people feel as though their identities are not important in those spaces. So we have to talk about these things. We can't fix what we don't face. And so this is, today, hopefully we will talk about things that maybe we can all do better. I myself have made many, many mistakes when it comes to language, and I'm sure all of us have. And so it is important to be daring and to talk about it. Because I believe language matters. Language matters, how we talk to people, what we say, what we choose, what the words that we choose, it matters. It matters to how people perceive us, how people then trust us, how people feel as though we respect them or value them or acknowledge who they are and their identities. All of that matters. So I think we have maybe like I don't know if the question is up here, but perhaps what we'll do is I'd love for you all to kind of put in the chat, when it comes to language, why does it matter? Why does it matter that we talk about inclusive language? So if you want to throw some words, phrases, in the chat as to why you think this topic is important in the work that you do, feel free to do that, and we'll try to read some of those out loud. Absolutely. So people can be, know that they're seen and that they're heard and that they matter, to be considerate of other people, to make sure they feel validated. It impacts culture. Language absolutely impacts culture. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Because we want to be person and client centered, here at a Jesuit institution, we talk about cura personalis, which is care for the whole person. And so this is a big part of the work that we do. Absolutely, respect and building relationships. Language is central and key to that. Words absolutely do have power to show that you're conveying an understanding of people. That's a great one. Create a culture of belonging and inclusivity. Creating trust. People feel safe with us. Building relationships, respect, being effective in your communication. Absolutely. Valuing diverse experiences. Words are powerful and can show respect. It shows that we prioritize, things that are important to us. So it shows that we're prioritizing maybe diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, social justice. Perhaps even this work can help us to be seen as non-judgmental when we use our words wisely. Thank you so much. Hopefully I didn't miss anything else. I know that comes in quickly, so I'm trying to make sure I read everything, but thank you all for sharing that. So you all really did, I think, address many of the points that I have. Why is inclusive language important? It's so that folks do feel valued. They feel respected and heard. They feel acknowledged in all of their identities, and particularly in those identities that folks don't really, shine a light on or empower, particularly those marginalized identities. It promotes opportunities for people, in jobs, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It combats bias and microaggressions. So these are the reasons why we want to absolutely, create a culture of inclusive language, and how that can change and shift the way in which people feel within that culture, within a workplace, within a community environment. So that is really important. So we're going to do a quick activity now. And this is going to be your first opportunity to kind of speak with each other and share a little bit about your name and your story. So a name is so important. And many of you might know the origin story of your name. And if you don't, that's okay. If you've ever heard the origin story of another person's name, or even if you've been able to name someone in your life, you can share that story. But we want to get in groups and have every person just share the origin story of their name, what's important about that. For me, my name is Naomi, Ruth, Laurel, Daradar, Sig. Those are my names. They're all important to me. My name was given to me as my first gift in my life by my grandmother, who passed away 5 years ago. And I always, when I did her eulogy, that was what I shared, is she gave me my first gift, which was to name me. My parents thought that I was going to be a boy. And so they had picked out the name Samuel. And when I was born, they had to find something and think of something. And my grandmother was the one that gave me that name. And so Naomi Ruth, which for some of you who may or may not, who may know or may not know, those are biblical names, and they go together. So it is a gift that I think about often in fondness when it comes to my grandmother. I also am thankful for my name, Laurel, which is my mother's side, my mother's unmarried name. And that name is important to me because it holds significance in my country. We have some ties to different politicians who share that last name. Daradar is my dad's last name, and it has Portuguese origins in it. And it is a name that for some reason no one could pronounce, even though it's 3 letters over and over again. But that was, my name has always been difficult for people to say. And of course, now with my married name is Sig, and that's important to me because it aligns with my partner and his family. But, those are pieces to my name story that I wanted to share. So as you share this story, and we'll get people in those groups, I want you to think about what feelings or thoughts come up when you listen to people's stories and when you share yours. For me, nostalgia and great gratitude and joy come up for me. So, all right, we'll let Julianne get you all in rooms. We'll have probably about 12 minutes or so to get folks able to share each of their stories.
Thank you, Naomi. So I want to encourage everyone, I put the topic of what we're going to be talking about in the chat. So make sure that you have the chat pulled up so that you can see it. Or if you want to all take either a screenshot of Naomi's presentation here or use your phone and take a quick picture just in case you can't get the chat to work, then please go ahead and do that. And I will assign everyone to their rooms now.
I accidentally exited my group. Is there any way I could be reassigned?
Yes, I can do that.
I don't know what I clicked. Thank you so much.
No problem. Oh, I almost assigned you, Naomi.
Oh, that's okay. So do you have a fun story about your name?
So I was named after my cousin, who I never met. She passed away when she was 16. She was hit by a drunk driver.
Oh.
And so yeah, that's my mom named me after her, and that's about it.
Yeah, to keep her memory alive. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I don't even know if she was particularly close with that cousin or what. She's never really told me much about her other than that initial story. So
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's funny because, you know, whenever I do an activity like this, most people know what their story, like why they are named, you know, what's the significance. Maybe they might even know um, you know, like the meaning of their name. You know, my kids were actually just talking about that a couple days ago. They were asking me, what does my youngest asked me, what does Eden mean? And why did you name me that? Like she was just curious, you know. So I told her it's because you know, my grandmother passed a year before she was born, and I wanted to pay honor to her and my grandmother's favorite. She loved flowers and she loved gardens, and one of her favorite songs was In the Garden. And so Garden of Eden, and then her middle name is Rose. And my other daughter's name is Lily. So I said, well, now I have a rose and I have a lily and I have a garden.
oh, I love that. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel bad for my middle son because there's not too much of a story to his name. My husband or my partner suggested it and we both liked the name and we're like, yeah, okay, Isaac, that's what it's gonna be.
I know. I like that name. Yeah, I Richard and I decided that we were gonna keep our kids' names at 4 letters each because of a few things. One, you always feel bad for that kindergartner who has to write their name and it's like Alexander or something like that. And it's so long. And then also monogramming is cheaper when you have 4 letters.
Good point
So,
there.
yeah. So they have longer middle names, but their first name is nice and short and sweet and easy, and yeah, so
Yeah,
it's good.
I can totally see where you're coming from with those long names because my maiden name was Mandela, and so I remember it was 15 letters long, and I'm like, this takes me so long to write. It's never ending.
Yep, I know. I thought about that. Like Jacqueline and Jonathan, like all of these longer names when they're Elizabeth, like spelling it all. I mean, most people shorten them anyways, but it is quite long.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you made me think about as well, one thing that we did with, well, everyone in our family, we all have like a double letter in our name.
Oh, yeah.
And it started off like not being intentional, but by the time we got to our third son, we're like, oh, well, now we need to make sure that he has a double letter somewhere.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, I get that. I think it's funny that you give, like, you have it almost becomes a little bit of a tradition too with names, and which is nice. So
It looks like,
did everybody get into a waiting room? And
I thought so, but I just received a message saying Casey, oh, she didn't join her round.
keep pressing that.
Okay, let me make sure. Okay, I think we just have the ones who haven't joined, I think, are just the other field faculty advisors or part of the team here. So Henrietta and Angie and Addie and Susan, are you guys all still in this main room here?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize you.
Oh yeah, that's okay. I actually I was drinking some tea and spilled it all over myself like right as we were going into breakout rooms. So I was like, I'll just pass on that for a second while I clean up and save my electronics.
I hope all is cleaned up.
Yes, it was okay. Everything was spared.
And I'm here taking attendance.
Excellent. Well, I think everyone should be where they're at then.
Great. We'll probably bring them back in about maybe 3 minutes, 2-3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering, I didn't want to mess around with it. I was in a training the other day and they were able to put like the time automatically on the breakout rooms, and so everyone knew from the very beginning how much time they had.
Yeah, so if you click on breakout rooms, you can click on the little settings wheel at the left, and it will, there's like a auto close breakout rooms after so many minutes. There's a countdown timer that you can also enable, so that way at 60 seconds, they'll see, oh, my breakout room's gonna end in 60 seconds.
Okay,
And
I
think you can see too, with the microphone icon, you can see if they're still talking.
yeah.
I don't know. I try to gauge that.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes. And you can
There's a
see,
lot of activity.
yes, people are talking. I wish, yeah, I've never done a Zoom, like an intensive Zoom training, but I think I would love to, just so that I could know all the ins and outs and like kind of secret tips that you can use for Zoom.
Yes,
Yeah.
that, and I also secretly wish that I could be on like a suggestion board for Zoom, because sometimes there are features that are not, I don't think they're an option, and I'm like, you know, it would be so great if that we could just do XYZ.
Oh, I know. And our university is moving to Zoom phone. So we
Oh.
won't have, yeah, so we won't have, unless we request it, we won't have physical phones in our spaces, but everything can be done on your phone. Like if you have Zoom, the Zoom app, or on your laptop, if you have the Zoom, with the Zoom app, it'll all be on there. So
That's cool.
yeah.
Interesting. But you'll still have like your own phone number and everything then?
Yep, it'll be your own phone number. It'll just kind of all run through the Zoom app.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a change we're doing over the summer, and hopefully, because no one's using their actual phones in their offices. That our IT did some kind of some research on that, and most people aren't using their phones. Our faculty aren't using their phones, so it's a lot of wasted, I think, resources, and
Yeah.
limit plastic. And if we didn't have phones, then we're not using all the other stuff that we don't need to. Be a little more
Yeah.
sustainable.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, should I give everyone 60 seconds?
Yep, I think that'd be great.
Okay. Okay, we'll get them to come back soon. And then, yeah, do you want everyone to be in the same breakout room that second time?
You can do that, or however you want to. It doesn't matter. I think we have, let's see, 7 rooms with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, like if we have about 5 people in each, or 5 or 6, that would be good.
Okay, perfect.
All right, welcome back to those who are coming back from their breakout rooms. I think everyone will be back in about 3 seconds. All right, welcome back, everyone. And thank you for sharing with your groups your name and your story, or the name and story of someone you know. So I wanted to just open it up and see if anybody had a particular interesting story, or if we could get 1 or 2 voices to share a little bit about their name story, and then maybe some feelings or things that came up for them as they were sharing that story. And if you'd like to put it in the chat instead of speak aloud, that is okay too. But if there's anyone that wants to share, feel free to unmute yourself and do that. See if there's anything in the chat. Anyone want to share, or anyone hear one from somebody in their group that was interesting?
I can share, not necessarily about my own name, but my daughter's name is Clarabelle, and she's named after her great grandmother, my grandma Claire, and her name has a lot of significance for us. So I knew my whole life that I wanted to have a daughter named Clarabelle. I was really close with my grandma Claire, and I remember being about 12 years old and going to get her mail, and I noticed some mail that said Clarabelle on it. And I was like, oh my gosh, who's Clarabelle? And she said, oh my gosh, don't tell anybody that's my real name. So she really didn't like that name. And to me, I was like, I feel like that's the most beautiful name I've ever heard. I love it. And so it really became, when we found out we were having a girl, my husband immediately was like, okay, so her name is Clarabelle, right? And it just became very significant, because it was like, there are things about all of us that we don't necessarily share with everybody, and that other people find really beautiful. And so it really held that significance for me, and also that it would be her own name, and she would have her own identity, but it still had some heritage to it. So
yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And that is a beautiful name. So the reason why I start with names is because, names are really important. I usually share this graphic. This is actually a poster, and I'll show you the second part of it. on the importance of pronouncing names and how that can be really a big part of inclusive language. As I shared with you earlier, my name was really hard for people to pronounce, particularly my last name growing up, Daradar. And I remember being a kid in, third, fourth, fifth grade and hearing, Charles Cooper, Naomi, Billy Feltner, so they would never say my last name in the class. My teachers would never attempt it. And I kept thinking to myself, well, what's wrong with my last name? Is there something wrong with it? Is there something wrong with me? Coupled with the fact that I was typically the only child of color in those spaces, it kind of gave me this feeling as though maybe I wasn't as important, or that there was something different or not as good about me. And so names are really important because they are part of who you are. They're part, there's significance to them a lot of times. And so, some things that I try to remind people as the year gets started, or as faculty or other people who are, hiring new people or getting to know new folks, make sure you make a good attempt to pronounce names correctly, because they are important to people. So, sometimes folks will say, well, I can't say that name. It's really hard. Practice. You'll make mistakes, just like I said, but if you are making an attempt to keep trying, ask for help. There are so many great resources out there right now. You can go on YouTube and listen to how some names are pronounced. Some folks will say, well, I'll just give them a nickname. I'll call them something else that'll be easier for me. Well, it may be easier for you, but it may also take away from the importance of that person's name. They might feel that that's, a microaggression. They might feel that it's making them, less important, or their name is, not as important as other people's names. We have to learn how to pronounce a lot of different names in history throughout, as you think about Roosevelt. And, I remember all these other names that, should be difficult for people to really read and pronounce, but we learn them. And so everyone should have that same right and respect. Some folks will say things, like, well, they told me that I could just call them this or something else. And we see this with particularly international students. And a lot of times when I ask students, why did you choose this as your, maybe a different name than what you were given. And they'll say, because it's uncomfortable when people have to learn how to say it. And I don't want other people to feel uncomfortable. And so, oftentimes think about that, that people have to change who they are to make other people feel comfortable. And even though it may be important to them. So ask people, make sure that, you can say, well, I would like to try to say your name correctly. Please, can you help me practice? I'd love to make sure to make it a full effort. Or some folks will say, I'll give them an American version of their name. Think about all the other things. What does that even mean? And how can that make folks feel as though they're not valued, or that their names are not important? I really like this quote. It says that if you put someone in a huge crowd with a lot of noise and you call their name, that person's going to hear that over all the other noise, all the other clatter, because our names are the first words off of our parents' lips to us. Like, they're the first things usually that people identify with, and that is our identity. So names matter. And this is a really important way of being inclusive. I don't know if you have, feel free to put in the chat if you're someone whose name always was said incorrectly and how that felt. I'll tell you, when I was when I was graduating at commencement, and many of you probably saw something similar just even this year, my name was read incorrectly, and my name was Naomi Ruth Laurel Daradar, and it was said incorrectly, completely incorrectly. So it's so important that we, and that was an important part of my life, a big milestone, and to not have it said correctly was a big deal. So really important and interesting. So this is the first, just wanted to share that with you and have us thinking about that. So what I want to talk about now is just this idea of allyship. Why is this, when we talk about inclusive language, why is this, a moment in which we can truly live out being an ally? I love this definition of allyship because it's action-oriented. It says that you're doing the hard work. It's not just the work, it's the hard work, because sometimes the work is hard, to be an ally, to actively support people from marginalized groups, often those with whom you have relationships or who are in your sphere of influence. So how can you be an ally if you don't do that hard work? And being inclusive, making mistakes and owning those mistakes, or saying, trying to learn about different ways to be inclusive in your language, that can be hard work. because it means we have to unlearn a lot of things in society that we've been taught to say, or the ways in which we are to approach language or communication. And that can be really difficult to try to take that out of how, we speak every day, because this is, it's learned behavior, and we kind of, stick to it sometimes. Because, if we want to be allies, we have to have action behind what we do. A lot of times people want to say that they're an ally, but they don't actually do anything. They might, just tell people that, hey, I'm here to support you, but you got to show, how are you supporting? How are you doing something? And so this work of being inclusive in our language is showing action behind that allyship. So we're going to go ahead and start talking a little bit about some of the different concepts of inclusive language that I wanted to share with you. And the first is person-first language, which is a highlight of what we had discussed, and actually was, I think, the genesis of the conversations that I had with folks about this training particularly, is how can we think about person-first language, and what is it? So, it's a way in which we can speak and write that, is emphasizing the person before the identity, perhaps the disability, the condition, the diagnosis. It's either called person first or people first language. It emphasizes the person as a whole, and it avoids kind of this idea of really using labels and objectives to define people or to define a person. So instead, what that does is it describes a person might have, maybe something, or they are a person that, for example, instead of saying, oh, that person is diabetic, it's a person, person first language would say that person is, that person is a person with diabetes, or those are people with diabetes, instead of just calling them a diabetic. So it kind of changes that. And it also changes kind of the feel of that language to really identify with the person or the people first. This was, person first language is so important to many communities that it's been written into the American with Disabilities Act in 1990 and the Individuals with Disabilities Act in 1997. It was also a big part of the AIDS activism movement, and was part of the Denver Principles in 1993, which really tried to help people with AIDS think about ways in which they would not be defined by just their diagnosis or their illness. And this is one of the statements that really kind of was part of that movement to emphasize this person first language movement. It says, we condemn attempts to label us as victims, a term that implies defeat. And we are only occasionally patients, a term that implies passivity, helplessness, and dependence upon the care of others. We are people with AIDS. So, this kind of shows to you that person-first language, people-first language has been part of many different movements and many different sectors within communities to really be seen as a person and not a diagnosis, not a disability, not a condition or an illness, but really to be seen as a whole person, and not to be seen, in this case with the people with AIDS movement, as just victims or those dependent upon others. And so this was really an important thing that, has been part of society in many ways. And it's usually seen as the way in which we should be writing as well. So when we think about when we're writing things, person first language is preferred, to be used as we, with whether you're writing articles or, even in writing everyday things, using person first language is important. However, not everybody agrees with that, and as language is always shifting, it's always evolving, and not everybody agrees with every single perspective. There are folks who think identity first language is more important and more ideal for their community or their identity. Some people feel like saying that, that part of their identity, hiding it or making it, something that you don't say can make it seem as though it's negative and that it's not an important part of who they are. And so some folks, particularly we see this in the autism and deaf and hard of hearing communities, many prefer, not all, but many prefer to use this identity first language. So really being able to say, this is a big part of who I am, and I want to be identified as deaf or hard of hearing, so these are things that, it's important that language is nuanced, and that to know that the best thing you can do is ask people. Make sure that you are understanding what somebody prefers when it comes to, how you might, communicate with them, how you might identify them. that's the most important, I think, foundational piece, is to take someone's lead, to ask them, and to listen to what they want instead of just making assumptions. And so when you think about just this sort of, you know, tension between these two, it's important to just sort of think about this. Be curious, learn about this, you know, be curious. You know, if we don't know about different communities, different identity groups, and the ways in which they want to be identified as, the language that they prefer to use, then, you know, we're going to be at a deficit at the beginning. We're not going to be able to know what and how. So be curious, whether it's doing your own homework and learning on your own, knowing that you might be working with a variety of different communities and identity groups, or just be curious and asking people. Make sure that you ask folks so that you're not making the assumptions. You know, be flexible. Things change, language evolves. People may say, you know, that they prefer this today and that tomorrow they prefer a different way in which to be identified. And, you know, we have to be flexible. We have to give people that space to shift when they need to, because identity shifts, you know, language evolves. And so being flexible is important. Be creative. You know, for some, it may be, as you're writing, maybe you use sometimes person first and sometimes identity first language to switch it off, so that you are showing that you understand that maybe some people prefer person first, others prefer identity first, and we're kind of being creative in how we then convey this. And then, of course, finally, always be respectful. You know, if someone says, you know what, that's not how, you know, that's not the way in which I want to be identified as, just, you know, respect that and say, thank you. I apologize. I didn't know that. I appreciate you giving me that information. And that's how I will revert to you from now on. Like, same with being respectful with names, you know, making sure when somebody says, actually, this is how you pronounce my name, being respectful, asking them how, you know, making sure you're practicing, or, you know, apologizing if you're calling them the wrong thing. So these are things that I think are key takeaways. So I want to shift now into learning about violent communication. This to me is one of those areas that I thought, you know, we don't talk a lot about, you know, but it's so ingrained in our culture here in the United States. It's such a part of the way in which we communicate with each other, that it's interesting, because violence and, you know, weapons, this is part of how we talk every day, right? So these are the examples I could share with you, you know, using bullet points, shoot me an email, take a stab at it, roll with the punches. Who's your target audience? When push comes to shove, you know, why don't you take your best shot, execute a plan? You know, that totally, you know, that I was blown away by that. Or you want to get your bang for your buck, or time to bring out the big guns. We say this all the time. We say it every day, and we don't realize that sort of violent language has permeated, you know, our culture in a way that maybe has shifted the way in which we think about violence in general. So it's just something to consider. And so I have 4 things that, you know, I would say if we could minimize or even stop doing, it would be great. So one, just get rid of the guns. We talk about guns all the time. Like, look at all these examples. Let's pull the trigger, shoot me an email. That person's a straight shooter. Always about guns. It's an interesting concept here, that's a big part of our language. Bullets are another one, you know, this idea of like bullet points, or, oh, you dodged a bullet with that, you know, just let's get rid of the guns, let's get rid of the bullets, perhaps even getting rid of just this aggression and violence, the violent tendencies in our language, things like, oh, you killed it, or, hey, let's kick around some ideas. You know, a lot of things have this tendency to be very aggressive. And then finally, we probably want to get rid of harming animals. You know, we think about, you know, let's beat a dead horse, or, you know, stop badgering me, or I'm going to take the bull by the horns. Like, we use that language really, it's really interesting. And I'm sure there's historical pieces to it. There's nuance to all of this. However, you know, if you think about it, we use that type of language all the time. And, you know, the question is, what is that doing in our community, in our culture? So just something to be thinking about. You know, next is thinking about gender inclusive language. You know, I think this has been something that a lot of communities, particularly higher education, K-12, we're thinking a lot about gender inclusive language in the classroom as we're working with folks. And, you know, so things like, there are a few things that you may want to avoid. So asking a person for their preferred, preferred pronouns, preferred sexual preference, like these things kind of assume that, what you prefer is not who you are. And so it's a preference. And so that can be really difficult for folks who believe that is their identity. It's not something that I prefer. It's just who I am. We want to avoid the binary. So brothers and sisters, thinking about like, oh, do you have siblings, or mom and dad, oh, do you have a caregiver, a guardian, a parent, like however you identify. I think about this, as I meet with families during new student orientation, I usually, in the past I would have said, oh, do you have a son or a daughter here? And now I'm like, oh, tell me about your student, making sure that it's open to whoever their student may be and however that student may identify. Avoiding, oh, do you, your husband, your wife, or just instead saying partner or spouse, instead of saying, oh, is that who that person of the opposite sex, it's like it's of the different sex, because we have a lot of different people who identify in different ways, and there is no binary there when you say different instead of opposite. So these are some things and ways in which we can be more inclusive in our language.
Naomi? Oh,
Yes.
I just wanted to point out Danielle's comment here in the chat.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And thank you, Danielle. You're actually foreshadowing something for later, but absolutely, I do love that one, because it shows nurturing versus violence. So instead of saying killing two birds with one stone, it's feeding two birds with one scone. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Danielle. So continuing with sort of this idea of gender inclusive language, we need to think about this as we greet people, as we talk to folks, instead of saying, I remember just watching movies and hearing things at shows, everyone says, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or, just that kind of language can be very much staying in that binary. There are totally different ways that you can do this that would avoid the ladies and gentlemen, the ma'am, the sir, the girls, the guys. I know here in Ohio, it's a lot of folks do that. We say, oh, hey guys, that's just sort of a way, or a way in which we just do that because it's culturally here in this area. That's how we say things. But we can avoid, making folks feel unseen, unheard, not valued, not acknowledged by saying things like, hey friends, I teach my 3-year-old that. I said, whenever you see people, just say, hi friends, so that it's everyone. You can say, good morning, folks. Hi, everyone. I love folks who will use the hey y'all, because I know that's also culturally for some Southern communities, it's inclusive. And so just being mindful, I think that's important. Just shifting our language to gender inclusive language. It respects folks. It acknowledges gender identities of all people. It removes assumptions, and it just makes things more inclusive for everyone. And it shows also that you care, right? It shows and it communicates that you have a culture, you have a value, whether in your workplace or even just personally, in which you're someone who is welcoming, who is willing to get to know people who identify in a variety of different ways. And who knows, that creates trust, and that trust can lead to sharing things that are important, or working together differently, or collaborating. So these can be really great things. And gender inclusive language also impacts the way we do things when it comes to recruitment. I think for some folks, maybe you have or haven't thought about looking at job descriptions or ads for jobs intentionally, making sure that they're not, super masculine coded or even feminine coded, which would prevent you from getting, a diverse aspect, or a diverse pool of candidates. If you read this right here, maybe if you want to put in the chat, what are some words that might have some different coding or might seem to be ones that you would take out. So are you a rock star developer with superhero problem solving skills, ready to join our dynamic team? We're seeking a tech winner who can bring innovative solutions to life, and a coding ninja who thrives under pressure. If you have a passion for excellence and a talent for overcoming challenges, we want you. So if you want to put in the chat, what are some things that stand out to you, or things that might, yep, ninja, rock star, superhero. Yeah, some of these words can definitely skew more masculine coded. And actually, you know, a winner, absolutely. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I've had to have so many conversations with different folks about utilizing language, even in meetings that just are all about sports references, which often I don't understand. And sometimes, I mean, I'm not the only one. There are people of all genders who don't understand. And it's just something that we try to think about in our meetings is, you know, if you're going to use a reference, maybe explain it, which would be helpful for everyone, truly. So there are 2 different gender decoding resources that I just wanted to put in here, and I know you'll get this later on, but this may be helpful if you want to just take your job descriptions, cut and paste them into these different resources. You can see if there are any words or phrases that you might not realize might be, you know, preventing different people from applying or thinking about the job. You know, we already know that there are a lot of different research points out there that show that women particularly can be left out of different types of job descriptions, and also don't apply for jobs when they don't feel that they're about 100% qualified for a position. And so this is just another layer that can be difficult. Also think about, you know, use of idioms or words that might be really difficult for people who are English language learners. You know, thinking about that is really important. I was once at a institution where somebody wanted to put in the job description, no prima donnas. And, you know, what does that mean? What, you know, for those who don't know anything about maybe ballet or even just understand what that means, but what is that, you know, I think that conveyed a different type of message. So these are things for us to consider. And now I want to focus about, you know, just on some language on race. I think it's really important that we talk about race and how language can be racialized in ways that are not helpful and can be actually you know, adverse to community and building that culture of inclusion and belonging. You know, for example, there are a few things. Avoiding just appearance descriptions when you're just describing people. This is something that we see in higher education and other places when it comes to security alerts. At Duke University in 2022, I know that their students wrote an article about how upset they were when a security alert went out that just basically described a generic African-American male. Didn't have any, you know, probably the description was something like 5'10" to 6'2", and, you know, dreadlocks and dark, you know, medium to dark skin. Like that described a lot of students on their campus and a lot of people in their community. And I know that at many of our institutions, we've had those things happen too. So it's really important to not just describe people based on racial identity, particularly in those types of things, but also just not describing people based on race, not just saying, oh, did you see that Asian woman over there? You know, that doesn't necessarily, you know, help people all the time. And what if you're in a big crowd, and how do you assume that somebody's Asian? Like, you don't know, you know, you're making an assumption based on race in that moment too. So these are things that we might want to think about and discuss as far as the ways in which we describe people. You know, the next point talks about being clear when we're talking about underrepresented, marginalized, minoritized communities. You know, what are we really trying to get at? You know, when we say, oh, we want more diversity, we want more underrepresented communities here. Well, are you talking about socioeconomically underrepresented communities? Are you talking about racially, ethnically, gender underrepresented communities? Are you talking about first generation students? I think sometimes we use these words as a proxy for things like race and ethnicity when we don't just say those things. And I think that's important for us to be clear about what we mean by these words. And so that's something that I think a lot of folks do, is we just kind of proxy some of these words for race particularly. We shouldn't use ethnicity as a noun, you know, that we don't call people, oh, you're a, you know, that's a Hispanic, like, you know, we wouldn't do that. We should not be using people's identities as a noun, particularly when it comes to race or ethnicity. We don't want to do that. We also don't want to assume somebody's identity when it comes to race. I think that happens. I don't know about you, but throughout my life, I've had many people ask me, what are you? Or look at me. And I've been in a mall and somebody pointed at me and said, you're Hawaiian. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And, you know, so I think, like, don't make assumptions, don't try to label people, ask people who they are. And then these last 3 are really important too. You know, Oftentimes people think that these last three are interchangeable, but Asian and Pacific Islander are not interchangeable. Many people who are Pacific Islander are very clear to say that is not Asian is not my identity. Black and African American are also not always interchangeable, and it's nuanced. And some folks prefer to be called Black, and some are, African American. Some feel like they're Afro-Latino or Afro-Latinx or Afro-Latin. Some people feel, same thing about Latina, Latino, Latinx, and Latina, which are, evolving right now, and Hispanic. They are not interchangeable either. So it's important to kind of know some of these things, and they're all nuanced, and there's a lot of history and a lot of, maybe some folks who might disagree too on pieces of this within the community and without the community, outside of the community. But it is important for us to have those conversations and ask people, what their thoughts, how do they want to be, how do they want to be identified? That's really important. So these are just a few things on race. There's so many more. I think about words that we just don't use anymore around race. For example, I try to let people know when they say things like, oh, Oriental, I say that's not a word that we use anymore. I still see it on menus though. I see it all the time, and when I walk up and down a grocery store aisle, and I'll say I've written a couple grocery stores to say you may want to take that off your aisle. So, but these are things that folks don't really think about and don't understand. But be curious, ask questions, do some research on it. Other things that I just want you to consider about race before we do a little bit of practice within your groups. One, language, it evolves over time. In any given moment in time, something may be acceptable, and then a little bit later it is not. So it's always evolving, or the terms may change. People may not want to use that language, that term anymore. And it's important for us to just be flexible, to always be asking folks their personal identity, how they want to be called, and make sure that that's just what we use, to be as respectful as we can. Sometimes different language is accepted in society in a moment and not in another moment. So we have to be thoughtful of that. We need to be thoughtful, as I said earlier, of English language learners. How many times I think about my family and my parents, particularly because they are, they came here to the United States and English wasn't their first language. And how many times people have said idioms or phrases that they just don't understand. And quite frankly, as I was growing up, I didn't understand either, because it wasn't something that my parents would say, in common phrases. And so that means when you're using them, somebody just doesn't know what you mean by them. One that I remember as a child not understanding is, I think it's like 6 of one and a half dozen of the other. I would say I have no idea what that means. What do you mean by that? And now I understand it, but these are things that we might not realize. Just some folks don't understand and then they're not following what's happening in a conversation. Another thing to consider is, I know I'm sharing all these things with you, and it's not to be the language police. Being an ally doesn't mean that you police language of others. It's about being open to considering what others feel and think, and making changes in our communication so that we can be more inclusive, and make sure that everybody feels they belong in whatever space we're in. We are all going to make mistakes. Just to remind you, I make mistakes. I have made mistakes in my language in the past, and, I probably will in my future. And what I need to do is be humble about it. And I think that's the most important thing, is to apologize and to say, thank you for sharing that. Can you tell me more? Ask for clarifying questions, ask those clarifying questions, seek to understand. I think that is the best way to learn. And we're not going to be perfect in this work. In diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work, social justice work, none of us is ever going to be perfect and know everything about everything, but it's about progress. How can we be a little bit better today than we were yesterday when it comes to learning about different communities, needs, and being inclusive and creating the culture that we want for our communities? And I want to share, why. Why is this important? And it's important because of this word microaggressions. When we have, when we've not kind of checked ourselves with our language, it can be viewed as a microaggression to some. So these can be seen as these everyday verbal, nonverbal, or environmental slight snubs or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon their marginalized group membership. Dr. Daryl Wing Su, this is his definition. And, it's this idea that it can be something that somebody says, mispronouncing your name over and over and over again, that just communicates you're not important, you're different, your identity is not important. So what we hope, and a lot of times these microaggressions are committed by people who are well-intentioned, they don't mean to be harmful, but it's just about learning and shifting and changing. As a opposite to this, or just, thinking about microaggressions, what can we be doing to be putting those positive pieces into our community and culture? And I think about micro affirmations. And if you haven't heard of this term, these are all the little ways that you can affirm someone's identity, ways that you can recognize and you can validate their experience, their expertise, build confidence, develop trust, foster belonging, and support someone in their career. So the small ways in which you can, share with somebody that they are important, their identity is important, acknowledge all that they bring. So these can be those things like, of course, learning someone's name or using someone's pronouns correctly, or, making sure that you're not assuming someone's identity, but asking them for it, using that person first or identity first language based on what they ask you to use. So these can be those things that will really help shift a culture. And so, there's a way in which when you look at your workplace, if you, have micro affirmations happening, these things can help really people to feel valued, to feel appreciated, that, who they are and what they contribute is important. And in the opposite way, if we're seeing microaggressions, it's making folks feel as though it mocks who they are, that they're belittled, they're insulted. And so these two kind of columns help us to think differently about when we use micro affirmations, what our communities, our workplaces, and our cultures may look like. And, when it comes to microaggressions, if we're using those, how can our workplace look? So, not that we can ever only be in one column or the other, but if we can all just sort of think about ways in which we can use our language to be more affirming instead of, making sort of those microaggressions happen, we can really truly build a better work environment for everyone. And also it's good learning for all folks. So I hope that you take some of the things that you learn and share it with people who are not here in this session. And hopefully you'll get this presentation and you can share those things as well. So I'm a believer in practice. I think you have to practice what you learn and process it and apply it, or you'll think of it maybe once or twice and never think of it again. So hopefully, having some of this practice will give you some ways to think about all the different things we talked about and some things we didn't talk about. And so I have a list of 12 different phrases. And so what I want you to do is look at the italicized words. And if you think it needs to be changed, how would you change it? Write out how you would change it and share that with each other. So we're going to get into small groups, breakout rooms, and we'll take about 15 minutes to have you all go through all of these, and then we'll debrief and we'll wrap up. So I'll have Julianne get everybody into the breakout rooms.
Thank you. And I'm going to add these last two in the chat because I didn't have them from the original one. But if everyone wants to either look at the chat, or you can also take a screenshot real quick. Let me get this scary movie one in. Okay. So, and about how long are we going to want the breakout rooms?
Let's do about 15 minutes, and that way folks have enough time to really go into every single one of them.
Okay.
Do they all have to be changed, or are there some tricks in there?
Potentially.
Okay,
So
okay.
definitely look at them and have those conversations. Again, this is all nuanced. Some people may think differently. So
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up all the rooms now. Sorry, I was just making sure everyone
Yeah.
got in a room.
No, that's great. Thank you.
I had a student at one point tell me about how they try to make sure that they don't use phrases that refer to money.
Mm,
And that really opened my eyes, just how often we kind of talk about like financial terms or someone's like ability to be successful in a way
yeah.
by using those terms. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, there's a good example of that. So one of the sororities that I used to work with, for one of their questions that they would do with each prospective new member was like, where are you going for spring break? And that wasn't inclusive because not everybody is able to go somewhere for spring break. Some people are going home to work, or some people, and just even like how that could create such a different spectrum of of socioeconomic difference and class difference, where some students are going to Spain and others are, I'm going to, somewhere local, or I'm not going anywhere at all, so just all of that and how that made some folks uncomfortable. So it is important to think about that. I think class is another a good topic to discuss for a lot of people, because I was actually just talking about that with one of my former students yesterday, this idea of food, because he wants to own a restaurant. And it's so interesting, that folks who have struggled to have food, like I remember when I was younger, even when with some of my friends, the question is always, did you have enough, right? After you have a meal, or as you're having a meal, do you have enough? Is that enough? And as you think about kind of when folks are moving towards maybe a middle upper class, it's more of the question is more of, was it good? It's not about enough, it's about, was it good? So it's so interesting, like the nuances between class and those conversations around food or around anything really. But so it's all very, very interesting, and we all have to talk about it.
Yeah. How did you get into this? Is this, I'm trying to remember, did you major in linguistics or?
I did not. However, linguistics was probably one of my favorite classes when I was in college. But it is, I think language and communication are really important to me. When it comes to strengths quest, my number one is typically communications or individualization. So it kind of makes sense that those two are at the top. But yeah, just communicating and has always been something that, as someone who also is bicultural and has been a cultural broker for my parents and my family, I've always had to sort of understand language and how people think. But then with my deep, I think, interest as well as passion for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, a lot of things can be cleared up by the way we speak to each other. We don't often do it in a way that's respectful. So that's just, it's an interest, it's a passion.
Yeah. No, it's just talking with you and having like these conversations over the past couple of months and everything. It's definitely made me look at things differently. And yeah, it's just really fascinating how often we might say things that could be really like harmful or disrespectful, and we just don't even like give it a second thought, or we're just like, oh, like that's their problem. And it's like, but no, like are we being kind or thoughtful or respectful if we aren't acknowledging the potential harm that we cause somebody else because of the words that we use?
Yeah, that's such a, important point. And, as I was thinking about the bullet point that I shared around language evolves and what's okay today or what was okay before is not okay today, I would just challenge anybody to watch a film from the early 2000s, any comedy film from the early 2000s, and not think that at some point you would say, oh, we wouldn't say that. We wouldn't do that today, because things are changing and things are evolving. Even now, when people say, use the word wild, where everyone, has understood, or a lot of people are understanding, like, not to just call something crazy, because it should be, oh, that's so interesting. That's wild. That's unexpected. How shocking. That's just different. It's a different way for us to be inclusive, and to not label things in a way that might be harmful to folks with different, mental health, issues, or just, needs or whatnot. So it's an interesting thing to think about, how our language has evolved over time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the one thing I tend to struggle with the most, is trying to find that other word in the moment.
Mhm.
Because I know for me, like, that is one thing that I've just, like, I'm on a medicine, and ever since I was put on this medicine, it impacted my memory in terms of being able to just pick out certain words. I'm like, it's right there. I know it's there. I just can't grab it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's definitely something I struggle with if I'm trying to find like that other word, because I know it would be a better word.
Yeah.
But yet I can't think of it in that moment. So
Yeah. No, I completely understand that. And you know what? It's okay to say, let me get back to you. I'm gonna think about it, because I'm not getting it right now, but let me just get back to you in a second. Because there's so many of those moments that I have. And, I still, like I said, I make mistakes. I've made mistakes, but there's so many words that I also didn't know the historical meanings to, and I learned about them. So, for example, one of them is, in the past, people use the word gypped, like, oh, I've been gypped. And this idea that it actually comes from the Romani, or the gypsy community, and this idea that, of the negative connotations of that whole community and population when it comes to, money and finances, and also, robbery, and all these other things that were part of that culture, that those, the stereotypes about that culture and community. So such an interest, it's interesting to learn about the history of some of the language that we use too, and how, wow, some people may not have ever thought, oh, wow, that goes towards this community, and a stereotype about that community.
yeah, I know, learning about like rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, when I learned about that one, I think I really tried to stop using that phrase afterwards. I'm like, oh, that's pretty offensive.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting, because, language is historical. There's, different pieces to it that, if you don't know it, and then if you're an English language learner, you really don't like have context for a lot of it. It can be really confusing, when you hear those phrases that people will say. You're like, what does that even mean? So, well,
There
hopefully
was,
people are
oh,
are enjoying their conversations, or,
I was gonna, it looks like people are definitely chatting.
yes, that is a good tip around looking at the microphones.
Yeah. Um, it was interesting. Someone, I was trying to catch you before you went on the next slide, and I couldn't. And so a comment that someone had made, I didn't want to bring it up too much later on. But someone had talked about how people always were misspelling their name,
Mm,
or even just like the mispronunciation. And I started thinking about that for me, because people would, well, still frequently will call me like Julianne or Juliana or Julie or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, I usually have like this 3 strikes you're out rule. And that's a sports euphemism there, but
I understand it.
yeah, but like I would always have that rule. Like I would correct them 3 times. And then after that, I kind of just set it in my head. I'm like, okay, if you haven't made that attempt after those 3 times to try to correct yourself, then I'm no longer going to correct you. Um, but yeah, it does make you view that person from a different lens, because you're just like, okay, you you never really did try to.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you had the conversation. So I've had to talk to people and say, my name is Naomi. It's not Naomi or Naomi. And and I distinctly remember it, and they still do it. And you're just like, what is it that you can't say? It's not that hard. And there are a lot of people named that, and even celebrities named it. And for some reason, it's said incorrectly. But you do wonder. You do wonder if it's not always malicious, but it also is. It feels disrespectful at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know one thing that I've started to do, like especially with students, is I'll try to, if someone tells me their name, I try to do like the phonetic sounding, like I'll write a note to myself just so I can make sure that I try to say it correctly like the next time.
Yeah.
And reference that until I know for sure that I have it correct.
Yeah, I've been using YouTube a lot to kind of figure out how to say somebody's like first or last name. And I've found that to be helpful, but it's not always accurate too. So you have to kind of remind, ask, say, hey, I tried to figure this out. So that's why the resources out there like Name Coach and other things are really important, because they can be super helpful, for faculty, for commencement, for all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, for commencement this year, they actually did like, and I don't know how you guys do it or you all do it at John Carroll, but students would actually scan a card and then it was a recorded voice that would say the student's name, but say it correctly. But I felt like there was a level of depersonalization from that. Like I definitely felt torn in terms of how I felt about having this automated voice versus having someone,
Yeah.
like when they give it to the person for them to actually read it.
Yeah, that was a conversation here too. It's interesting because, you kind of ask yourself, like, so is it that difficult to do that you can't read something? But at the same time, it's horrible when people read the names incorrectly at such an important, momentous occasion. What was it? Was it Thomas Jefferson University, or I can't remember which school it was, but it was a school with Thomas. It must have been Thomas Jefferson. And they said Thomas incorrectly for one of their students. Like, what? It just is it, and it was just this person reading it had been given the wrong phonetic information, and so everybody's name was read incorrectly. So it was
Yeah.
well, they'll be back in 30 seconds.
Let me say. And it looks like everyone's still going strong in terms of chatting. So
And I don't really know why there's a purple thing on my screen. Do you see this purple thing?
oh, I do.
That's weird. I don't really know where that came from, but
There's a setting in Zoom where you can allow participants to annotate, and if they click that, they can write on your screen. So somebody must have accidentally hit it. and scribbled.
okay, I thought maybe I did something or my laptop was broken. I'm like, oh, it's
If you
turning into-
hover in the like bottom left over the audio button, you see a green like pencil, and that allows you to annotate.
I see. Okay.
I don't know why.
It's so funny. It's all right. Not a big deal. All right.
So it looks like the timer added an additional 60 seconds to inform everybody that their rooms would be closing. So we have 20 more seconds before people are coming back.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Oops.
Everyone should be back now.
Great. All right. Well, everyone is getting back. Probably a couple more seconds. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a great dialogue with your breakout group. So if you, what we want to do now is just kind of go through each of these, and I'd love to hear from folks, or if you would like to put it in the chat, feel free to do it that way as well. But I'd love this part to be participatory. So if we could just go through each of these, and I'd love to hear what maybe you did or changed, or maybe the alternative phrases or things that you might have used. Again, you can unmute or you can put it in the chat. So the first one is, what are your preferred pronouns? So what were some things that folks maybe talked about with this one? I see that folks struggled with number 3. Okay.
We talked about just leaving out the word preferred or anything in front of pronouns. What are your pronouns?
Yeah. Yep. What are your pronouns? So not adding that word. Anyone else have anything different? I remember hearing from someone else, doing something like this. It was, perhaps maybe I would share mine first as a way to be able to say, hey, these are my pronouns. And, if you'd like to share, or you're comfortable sharing, what are your pronouns? So that way it's not a, you have to answer type of thing for some folks who might not feel ready to share their pronouns or comfortable in that moment, depending upon if it's a one-on-one conversation or even a group conversation. So that was another alternative that I've heard before. So yeah, absolutely. So just taking out preferred. How about number 2? What did folks say about that?
That putting in the word Asians was completely unnecessary. All you have to say is there are a lot of people in the cafeteria today.
Yeah. Yeah, why singling it out? And also why, for some folks, I teach a little bit of Asian American history, and, for some that kind of felt very, hearkening to this yellow peril, like, oh, there's too many Asians. What does that mean? And this idea of,
what did you just say?
Yellow peril? It's a historical reference to a time, in history when folks were really afraid of, too many, particularly Chinese coming into the country. And actually, the Chinese were the first community that was excluded via the Chinese Exclusion Act from coming into the United States. And that's, there's some historical reference around, the fear of too many people of one community coming into the US that are people of color. So that was, so that was something else somebody had said. Thank you for putting that in, Angela. It's in the chat to have. So our group replaced Asian with diversity. There's a lot of diversity in the cafeteria today. Okay. Anything else with that one? And I appreciate you just saying, like, it's just, probably just shouldn't put that in. And why are you even referencing that there are a lot of people, like a lot of one group in the cafeteria? What does that mean? And why would you say that? Would you say that about dominant communities, so.
I kind of think though, sometimes in situations, like you said, it depends on what we're talking about or why we're talking about it. Like I've been places where it's like, oh, it's nice to see this diversity in the place. Yeah. So I don't think it's always necessary to not even mention it, in my opinion. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because it could be that, yeah, this is a good thing. Like we are seeing, some positive, and it's all about what's the intent, right, of the conversation. And so absolutely, you're correct too. I think it depends upon what the context is. How about number 3?
We thought you should just eliminate the reference to disabled people at all. And either I'm inspired, I'm excited about all the people who are playing the sport, but to be inspired by disabled people is a microaggression right there. The word inspired suggests that they shouldn't be playing the sport. So we didn't like that sentence at all.
Yeah. No, yeah. A lot of people have had the same reaction to that sentence, and how that may feel, like you're marginalizing that the community by kind of using that language.
Yeah. We don't. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask a question. That's a good perspective I had not thought of, but what's a good way to put into words, like recognizing how much more effort it might take for someone who is disabled to play a sport and to want to honor that. And so you could be inspired by that. Like, how, any suggestions on how you would put that into words so that it wouldn't be a microaggression?
And I think for some people, you know, that would be taken as a microaggression because it's this idea, as you know, was mentioned, that maybe they're not supposed to be there, or it wouldn't, you know, typically folks can feel that way. However, I understand what you're saying too, and it is difficult to kind of, how can you convey this in a way that's truly being authentic about saying, you know, that is something that makes you feel, you know, inspiration of some sort, and or maybe acknowledging some of the challenges that different people might face based on their ability, based on, you know, any part of their identity. So I don't necessarily have the best answer, but it is something that I think you probably want to make sure you are able to communicate it in a way where people understand it. It's not derogatory, or it's not trying to be offensive, but it truly is something that you feel, you know, some type of gratitude, inspiration, joy with. So can't really give you the best answer. This is one that is really difficult for a lot of people. So it's not, so you're not you're not alone. This is one of those that is hard for everyone to answer.
We skipped using disabled at all at the campus I taught at. We used the term temporarily abled.
Yes.
And that applies to everybody else.
Yes, and temporarily able-bodied is a term that a lot of people are starting to use a little bit more. And so, yeah, this phrase, you know, even though it may be identity focused or identity first language, it may not always be the language that everyone wants to use, and or isn't applicable to everyone like temporarily able-bodied might be. So let's do a couple more of these. So what about number 4?
We had said maybe use like soulmate instead of spirit animal. For one, someone in the group brought up that it's an indigenous term. And so as someone who is not, I probably shouldn't technically be using it in the first, or, you know, like I shouldn't be using, well, whoever shouldn't be using it. But also just the connotation of calling someone an animal, depending on how they identify. So we thought maybe use soulmate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we might have skipped a couple, but anyone have, how about 4 or 5? Anybody have any ways to change those two?
For number 4, we just said, did you catch the name of that person who was just here?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, not assuming somebody's two identities that person might have. Absolutely. How about number 5?
The ability. We are looking for a candidate that can demonstrate the ability instead of his, or the abilities.
Yep, it can be about the abilities to meet the job, or demonstrate their abilities. So it's inclusive of any gender. So absolutely, those two could definitely work. How about number 7?
You could say my heart breaks, well, if you want to say that, but anyway, the homeless, instead of homeless, unsheltered or unhoused, or people experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great. Thank you. That's a term that I've been learning more about, is, you know, unhoused. You know, so I think that is important. I think this is about time and context, and maybe, you know, at a different point in time, that was the word that everybody used, but now we're kind of moving towards probably more, you know, person first language, or even just different language around this. How about number 8? And thank you to, I can't remember, was Danielle or can't remember who might have said a good answer for this already.
We could just say you got a lot done. You got accomplished a lot today.
Absolutely. Perfect. You could just say, I did a lot today, got a lot done, feeling accomplished and productive. How about number 9?
We said at risk for what? It's very vague.
Yep.
And if you don't want to use that risk, it could be focused on youth with issues related to substance abuse or truancy or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Be specific. Again, it's like the comment that, or the, sort of one of the points that was made about, be specific about what you mean. Don't just use blanket statements. How about number 10?
We had a field day with that one. I'll let somebody else speak. All right, nobody else will. Well, first of all, talking about your coworker in and of itself, and especially sharing personal health information. And then you have the word suffers. So we just kind of, I personally, and I think other people kind of may have had other thoughts or got along with it, I don't know. But why say it at all? I mean, if a coworker has a special need, or you're trying to, you want your friends to recognize that this person has a need, there's so many better ways to say it, but why would you be talking about your coworker at all?
Yeah, that's a great point. Like that would be a good question as to why you're sharing that information. And for some,
And I'm thinking too, like one of my coworkers experiences depressive symptoms or something like that, but not to label.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know whether this person has any type of medical background. You're like, who knows whether or not that's even a true statement. So yeah, these are all really good points. Thank you for sharing. I know we're over time, but really quickly, anybody have 11 and 12, some thoughts about those two?
Well, the same thing with 11. There you're addressing a person as a diagnosis, but both 10 and 11, you're talking about personal health information of another person's personal health information, which would definitely in certain situations be a HIPAA violation, and it just is not appropriate in general. And then number 12, the scary movie totally frightened me. Instead of throwing around diagnostic labels casually.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to say thank you all for going through this. I know there's many, many, many more different ways in which you can kind of address examples, and that it's all nuanced. It's all difficult. It's not easy. It's not sort of, one way or the other. There's a lot of nuance to all of this. It's complicated and complex, but the best thing I can say is that we just have to try, to do the best until we can, until we know better. And then when we know better, we need to do better. And hopefully today you've learned a few things that maybe you'll incorporate into the way in which you communicate with others. And I just want to say thanks for the time. I have a couple resources I want to share with you here. Hopefully you'll get those as well. The NCAA guidance on inclusive language, Linguistic Society of America's DEI resources, and NIH's Person First and Destigmatizing Language links. These might be very helpful as you think about writing or speaking with others, or sharing these resources with your team. That could be helpful. And here is my contact information. I'm happy to chat with anyone or follow up. Like I said, I'm not perfect. I don't know all the answers, but I find this very interesting and important work to do, which is to be inclusive communicators who can help create the cultures and environments that we want for everyone to feel that sense of belonging. So thank you all for taking the time to be here with me today.
Thank you. This was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi. It was such a pleasure to have you with us. Just so everyone knows, I put the evaluation in the chat. You can also scan that QR code, although I don't know what that little purple thing, if it'll work out. So
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. So feel free to click on the evaluation. We will have the PowerPoint slides posted on our website, which I also put in the chat in probably the next week or so. And thank you so much all for coming. And thank you so much again, Naomi. This was fantastic.
Thank you all. All right. Have a great weekend and thanks again.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I'll be in touch again. Thank you.
Great. Take care.
Bye.
I'm just trying to get all these websites off of here.
Octavia, I think if you go to the bottom right-hand corner, then you can click end and that'll help you with getting out.
Well, I was just trying to get the websites out the chat room.
Oh, okay. Here I can post it again. Are you able to see the chat?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I don't know if we were staying on or not.
I didn't know either, so.